The road twisted endlessly through the pine forest, narrow and uneven, cracked by years of frost and neglect. Sarah Whitfield gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles pale under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. The heater hummed, weakly, unable to keep the December cold from seeping into the SUV. Beside her, her husband Mark stared out the window, silent. Their son, Ethan, 7 years old, dozed fitfully in the back seat, clutching his stuffed fox against his chest. It was supposed to be a simple trip, just a weekend away from the city. Mark's old college friend had invited them to a gathering in a small mountain town in Vermont, the kind of place where the snow fell heavy, the air smelled of wood smoke, and life moved at a slower pace. But as the GPS signal flickered and died, Sarah felt something else in the air, a weight, a silence too deep for comfort. "Are you sure this is the right road?" she asked, her voice breaking the quiet. Mark checked his phone, no service. He frowned. "It should be. Alan said the old Blackwood place was just past the ridge. Big farmhouse, can't miss it." Sarah wasn't convinced. The trees pressed close to the road, branches heavy with snow, as if trying to block their path. Every so often, the headlights caught the hollow eyes of deer lurking between the trunks, their bodies motionless, watching. Finally, the forest thinned, revealing a hilltop. At its crest stood the house. The farmhouse was massive, its frame silhouetted against the night sky. 3 stories tall, with a steep roof and windows like dark, empty sockets. A single light flickered in an upstairs room, but the rest of the house loomed in shadow, as if the forest had swallowed it whole. Ethan stirred. "Are we there yet?" His voice was groggy, frightened. "Yes, buddy," Mark said. Though his tone was uncertain, the driveway crunched under the tires as they pulled in. Another car was already parked near the porch, dusted with snow. The Whitfields exchanged a glance. When Sarah opened her door, the cold hit her like a knife. The air smelled strange, like wet earth, but sharper, metallic. She thought of rust, or blood. The front door opened before they reached it. A man stepped out, waving cheerfully. Alan, tall and broad-shouldered, with the easy grin of someone too comfortable in strange places. "Mark, you made it." He clapped Mark on the back, then looked at Sarah and Ethan. "And this must be the family. Come on in, get warm. You picked the coldest weekend of the year to come up here." Inside, the house was even bigger than it looked from outside. The ceilings soared, beams black with age. The wood floors groaned under every step. A fire burned in the massive stone fireplace, but the heat didn't seem to reach the corners of the room, where shadows pooled like spilled ink. There were others too. Alan's wife, Rachel, slim with tired eyes. A few other couples, old friends of Mark's, from college days, laughing over glasses of wine. For a moment, Sarah let herself relax. Maybe it would be fine, just a weekend with friends. But Ethan tugged at her sleeve. His face was pale. "Mom," he whispered, "there's a woman upstairs." Sarah blinked. "What woman?" Ethan pointed toward the staircase, its banister carved with twisting, almost grotesque patterns. She was standing there, watching us. Sarah glanced. The stairs were empty, only darkness above. She forced a smile. "You probably saw Alan's wife, honey." But Ethan shook his head violently. No, her face was wrong. Dinner was served in the long dining hall, a table that could have seated 20, though only 9 gathered around it now. Candles flickered, their flames bending as if disturbed by unseen drafts. The talk was loud, cheerful, fueled by wine and old memories. Sarah ate little. She kept glancing at Ethan, who pushed food around his plate. At one point, the lights overhead flickered, just for a second. No one seemed to notice except Ethan. He whispered again, too quietly for the others to hear. "She doesn't like the light." Sarah's skin prickled. That night, in their assigned bedroom on the 2nd floor, Sarah struggled to sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the old window panes. Beside her, Mark was already snoring softly. She sat up, restless. Something felt wrong. The silence of the house wasn't like any silence she'd known before. It was watching. Then she heard it. A creak, 2, 3, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Just outside the door, Sarah's heart pounded. She reached for Mark, but froze when she heard Ethan's voice, muffled from the room next door. Please, stop. Don't come closer. She bolted from the bed, yanking the door open. The hallway was empty. The floorboards stretched long and dark, lit only by the weak glow of a single lamp. But on the floor, just outside Ethan's door, were wet footprints, small, bare, leading away into the shadows at the far end of the hall. Sarah's breath caught. She turned toward her son's room, hand trembling as she pushed the door open. Ethan was sitting upright in bed, wide-eyed, clutching his fox so tightly his knuckles had gone white. She was in here. Mom, he whispered, his lips quivering. She leaned down and said my name. And then, before Sarah could speak, the upstairs light, the one they'd seen from outside when they first arrived, flickered once, twice, and went out. The house groaned. Something was awake. The silence, after the upstairs light died, was unbearable. Sarah stood frozen in Ethan's doorway, her breath caught in her throat. The hallway behind her stretched long and black, lined with closed doors that suddenly felt like sealed vaults. She could still see the damp footprints, glistening faintly on the wooden floor. Leading away toward the far end of the corridor, the darkness seemed thicker, hungrier. Mom, Ethan whispered again. She said my name. She was right here. Sarah forced her legs to move, stepping quickly into his room. She closed the door, locking it, even though some part of her new locks meant nothing in a house like this. Ethan, listen to me, she said, crouching by his bed. It's just a dream. Nothing's here. But her voice was hollow, false even to her own ears. She tucked him in tighter, brushing the sweat-damp hair from his forehead. He was trembling so hard she could feel it through the blankets. When she leaned down to kiss him, Ethan whispered something so softly she almost didn't catch it. She said, "You can't keep me." Sarah's chest tightened. Morning came gray and pale. The farmhouse looked less menacing in daylight, though its walls still seemed to sag under centuries of secrets. Snow had fallen heavy through the night, blanketing the ground, muting every sound. The other guests bustled downstairs, gathering for breakfast. Alan was cheerful, slapping Mark on the back, pouring coffee, talking about sledding and bonfires. The fire in the hearth crackled bright, but Sarah noticed it the same thing she'd felt the night before. No matter how warm the flames, the house itself was cold. The shadows in the corners clung stubbornly, as if light could never fully banish them. She pulled Rachel, Alan's wife, aside in the kitchen. "Do you ever hear anything at night?" Rachel's eyes flicked toward the staircase before she forced a laugh. "This place makes noises. Old wood, strong winds. Don't let it get to you." But her voice cracked on the last word. Later that afternoon, the group bundled up to explore the property. The men dragged sleds from the barn, while the women walked the perimeter, their boots crunching in the snow. Ethan stayed close to Sarah, clutching her hand, as they passed the far side of the house. Sarah stopped. There, along the stone foundation, the snow hadn't settled. The ground was bare, damp, as if something had been pacing back and forth through the night, leaving the earth raw and wet. She crouched, brushing her gloved hand over the dirt. The tracks weren't from boots. They were bare, small dot like the footprints in the hallway. "Mom," Ethan's voice was small. She turned. He was staring at the second-floor window. Sarah followed his gaze. A pale figure stood in the glass, a woman, gaunt and motionless, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. The window pane distorted her features, but Sarah saw enough dark hollows, where eyes should have been. The figure raised one hand and pressed it flat against the glass. Sarah's stomach lurched. She blinked just once, and the window was empty. That evening, the mood was heavier. The friends tried to keep it light, drinking, telling stories, laughter echoing against the rafters, but every so often, the lights flickered, and each time Ethan flinched, pulling closer to Sarah. After dinner, Alan brought out an old bottle of whiskey. "This house has stood for nearly 2 centuries, he said, pouring generously. "You'll hear all sorts of tales. Folks around here say it's haunted, but every old place is haunted, right?" He laughed, but no one joined him. One of the guests, a woman named Claire, leaned forward. "Haunted by what, though?" Alan shrugged. "They call her the Blackwood Widow. Story goes that in the late 1800s, the farmer's wife hanged herself after her child drowned in the well out back. Some say she still walks the halls, looking for him." Ethan's fork clattered to the table. Sarah touched his arm. "Sweetheart, it's just a story." But Ethan shook his head violently. "It's her. That's who I saw." The table went quiet. Alan cleared his throat, forcing a grin. "See? That's how legends spread. Kids pick up on things, and soon everyone's spooked. It's all nonsense." But Sarah noticed Rachel staring into her glass of wine, silent, her hand trembling just slightly. That night, Sarah insisted Ethan sleep in their bed. Mark grumbled but agreed, exhausted from too much whiskey. Sometime after midnight, Sarah stirred awake. A sound threaded through her dreams, pulling her to the surface. A whispered. At first she thought it was Ethan, mumbling in his sleep. But when she leaned closer, his lips were still. The whisper came from the wall. She pressed her ear against the cold plaster. The voice was faint, broken by static, like a radio just out of tune. She couldn't make out words, only fragments. "Come back, mine." Down below, the wall was vibrating softly, as though something on the other side was breathing. Sarah jerked away, heart hammering. She shook Mark awake, but he only grunted, rolling over. Then Ethan's eyes snapped open. He stared at the ceiling, rigid, and in a voice not quite his own, he whispered, "She's under the floor." Sarah's blood ran cold. The next morning, Sarah went looking for Rachel. She found her in the barn, away from the others, staring out through the slats at the snow. "Rachel," Sarah said quietly. "You know something, don't you?" Rachel's lips pressed tight. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, when Alan bought this house, the locals tried to warn him. They said it was cursed ground, that nothing stays buried here. Sarah's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Rachel turned, her face pale and drawn. "It means you should keep your son close. Closer than you think." That evening, just before dinner, the group discovered the basement door. It had been hidden behind a tall cabinet in the pantry. Alan swore he hadn't known it was there, though the others laughed, saying every old farmhouse has secrets. But the door itself was strange. Heavy oak, with iron hinges, and a lock that had long since rusted. Symbols had been scratched into the wood, circles, crosses, jagged marks that looked more like warnings than decoration. Alan forced it open with a crowbar. The hinges screamed. A rush of cold air burst upward, carrying a smell so foul Sarah gagged. Damp, mold, and something else like rotting meat. They held flashlights as Alan led the way down the stone steps. The air grew heavier with each step, the smell stronger. At the bottom lay a cellar carved directly into the earth. The walls were damp stone, streaked with black. Shelves lined with jars of murky liquid leaned against one wall, and in the center of the floor was a wooden trapdoor, smaller than a coffin, but not by much. "Jesus," Mark muttered. "What the hell is that?" Alan crouched, brushing dirt away. There were carvings on the wood, strange looping runes, and in the middle, burned into the grain, was a single word: Mother. That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept her arms wrapped around Ethan, every sound amplified by fear. Sometime past 3, She woke again to the sound of creaking. Not in the hallway this time. Beneath them, the floorboards shifted as if something was moving below, dragging itself along. She held her breath, praying it would stop. Then Ethan's head turned, slowly, toward her. His eyes were open, but they weren't his. "She wants me," he whispered, his voice layered with something deeper, older, "and she's almost here." The walls shuddered. The lamp flickered, and from the floor beneath the bed came a single knock dot, then another dot, and another dot, as if someone were trapped inside the earth, begging to be let out. The knocking did not stop. Sarah clutched Ethan against her chest, her pulse thundering in her ears. The floor vibrated with each blow, faint but insistent, as though something was clawing upward from beneath the room. Then, silence. Only the sound of wind outside, rattling the shutters. Sarah dared to breathe again. She glanced at Mark, who was still asleep, dead to the world, as if whatever force stalked the house had chosen to pass over him. Or maybe it wanted him unaware. Ethan stirred. His eyes fluttered open, but the voice that came from him was not his own. "Why won't you let her in?" Sarah froze. "Ethan, she's waiting, in the dark. She knows your name now." Sarah shook him, desperate. "Stop it. Please wake up." And then, just like that, he blinked, confused. "Mom," his small voice, trembling. She pulled him close, sobbing silently. She did not sleep again that night. By morning the snowstorm had worsened. Heavy flakes fell relentlessly, blanketing the house in white silence. Alan checked his truck-buried tires frozen in ice. No one was leaving. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, either. The guests gathered in the living room, wrapped in blankets, trying to distract themselves with card games and conversation. But Sarah could feel it, the thin, trembling thread of unease, tying them all together. Rachel said little, staring into the fire. Claire complained about the storm, her voice brittle. Mark drank too much coffee, pacing. Only Alan seemed determined to keep the mood light, telling loud stories, laughing too hard. But Sarah noticed his hands shaking as he poured more whiskey into his mug. Later that afternoon, Sarah went upstairs to fetch extra blankets. The hallway was dim, lit by a single bulb that buzzed faintly as she passed the mirror at the end of the corridor. She froze. Her reflection wasn't moving. It stood still, staring back at her, even as she lifted her hand. Then, slowly, its head tilted. Not like hers, sharper too far, until the neck looked broken. Sarah stumbled backward, heart hammering. The reflection smiled, a wide, unnatural grin, stretching the face too far, and then the bulb above her flickered and burst, showering glass. When she looked again, the mirror showed only her own pale, terrified face. She ran back downstairs, clutching the blankets like a shield. That night, they all heard it, the voice that began as a low hum, drifting through the walls. Then words, drawn out, echoing as if carried on water. Come down, Alan cursed, grabbing a flashlight. It's just the wind in the cellar. Old pipes, bad insulation, I'll prove it. He led the group down the basement steps. The stench was stronger now, so thick Sarah gagged. The jars on the shelves rattled faintly, though no one touched them. And there, in the center, the TRAPDOOR. It was shaking, just slightly, but enough. Alan knelt, bracing himself, and yanked it open. The smell hit them like a wave-damp soil, rotting wood, something older, fouler. The flashlight beam revealed a narrow shaft descending into blackness. A sound rose from below. Not wind, not pipes. Weeping, Rachel gasped, clutching her chest. Claire backed away. What the hell is that? Alan forced a laugh, though his face was pale. It's just water dripping, acoustics playing tricks. But Sarah wasn't fooled. The sound was too human. A woman's sobs, echoing upward. Ethan tugged her hand. His eyes were wide, glassy. She's under there, he whispered. She's been waiting. That night, Sarah insisted again that Ethan stay in their bed, but he tossed and turned, mumbling, sweating, around 2 a.m. She woke to the sound of someone humming, a lullaby. It drifted from the hallway. Soft, almost tender. Sarah slipped from the bed, heart pounding, and opened the door. The hallway stretched, dark and endless. At the far end, near the staircase, a figure stood, a woman draped in black. Her hair hung in wet strings, her head tilted at that same grotesque angle. Her face was obscured, but her mouth moved, singing the lullaby in a voice that was both soothing and unbearably wrong. Sarah couldn't move. Her legs were lead. The figure slowly lifted a hand, curling its finger in a beckoning gesture. Then, Ethan screamed from the bedroom. Sarah spun back. He was thrashing in bed, his small hands clawing at the sheets. "She's in the floor. She's pulling me." The boards beneath him bulged, as if something pressed upward from underneath. Sarah lunged, grabbing him, yanking him away, just as the wood splintered. A hand punching through. It was pale, thin, nails black and cracked, fingers too long, jointed wrong. They grasped blindly, reaching for the child. Sarah screamed, dragging Ethan back. The hand scraped across the floor, leaving deep gouges in the wood before sinking back down into the dark. The boards sealed again, as if nothing had happened. Mark bolted upright, half drunk, shouting, but Sarah barely heard him. She clutched Ethan, rocking him, her own tears spilling hot and fast. Ethan whispered through sobs, "She wants me to be her son." The next day, Sarah confronted Rachel again. "You knew. You know what this is." Rachel's face was ashen. Her hands shook as she lit another cigarette. "They called her the widow," she said finally. "But she wasn't just a grieving wife. She was something else. They say she made a bargain when her baby drowned, that she would never be alone again. She called to the hollow ones, the things that live between earth and air, and they answered." Sarah's skin crawled. "What are you saying?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "She doesn't just haunt this house. She feeds. She takes children. She keeps them forever." That evening, the storm worsened. The power flickered, then went out, plunging the house into darkness. They lit candles. Shadows leaped across the walls, twisting into shapes that looked almost human. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed, then another. The air grew thick, suffocating, and then Ethan stood up, his eyes blank, his body rigid, in a voice that was not his. He said, "She's in the cellar. She wants us all to come down." And one by one, the candles went out, leaving them in total blackness. The cellar stank of earth and rot. Alan's flashlight shook in his hand, its beam jittering across the damp stone walls as the group descended the steps. The storm howled outside, but down here the air was dead still, heavy, pressing in. The trapdoor waited in the center of the cellar floor. Dirt and sawdust sprinkled its edges, as if it had been opened and closed countless times long before they ever found it. Rachel stayed at the top of the steps, pale, her arms wrapped around herself. "Don't open it again, please. Nothing good comes from that door," Alan sneered, trying to mask his fear. "It's just a damn hole in the ground. Whatever's making those noises, it's explainable." But Sarah noticed his voice cracking, his knuckles white where he gripped the flashlight. Mark swallowed hard, then explained it. "Alan, explain the hand that came through my son's floor last night." The silence that followed was suffocating. Alan knelt, crowbar in hand. The runes carved into the wood seemed deeper than before, glowing faintly in the flashlight's beam. The burned word mother pulsed like fresh scar tissue. He jammed the crowbar beneath the edge. The wood shrieked as the trapdoor lifted. A wave of cold air rushed out, wet and metallic, stinging their throats. The beam of the flashlight caught the shaft, beneath earthen walls, leading down into a space that looked impossibly large for the farmhouses, foundations, and then, from the dark, came the sound, weeping, louder this time, clearer, A woman sobbing, her voice raw, broken. "Help me," Ethan whimpered, clutching Sarah's coat. "It's not real, Mom. She's lying. That's what she does." Sarah's stomach twisted. Alan lowered the flashlight further. The beam fell onto something just beyond reach. A figure curled against the wall. Pale skin. A woman's shape. Long hair covering her face. "Oh my God," Claire gasped. "There's someone down there." The figure shifted. Slowly, the head lifted. The face turned toward the light. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw a real woman, gaunt, hollow-cheeked eyes, swollen from crying. Then the mouth stretched too wide, teeth black, endless. The eyes rolled white. The sobbing turned into laughter. Alan stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. It clattered, its beams spinning wildly, flashing across dirt and bone. Yes, bones, piles of them, children's small skeletons half buried in the earth. Sarah screamed, dragging Ethan away. The laughter swelled, echoing off the cellar walls, rising into a shriek. Then, the trapdoor slammed shut with a force that shook the house. For hours, no one spoke. They sat huddled by the fire, the storm raging outside, the house groaning with every gust of wind. Rachel finally broke the silence. Her voice was hoarse. "Now you understand. She's not a ghost. She's something older. Something that was here long before this house was built." Mark rubbed his temples. "What the hell is she?" Rachel stared into the flames. "They call her the widow because of the story that she lost her child. But the truth is worse. She takes children. She makes them hers. That's how she stays strong. That's why she's still here." Ethan sat apart from the others, staring into nothing. His lips moved silently, as if repeating words only he could hear. Sarah crawled to him, shaking him gently. "Ethan, talk to me." He blinked, his voice flat. "She says she already chose me. You can't stop it." Sarah felt her heart splinter. That night, no one slept. They kept the fire burning, candles lit, anything to push the shadows back. But just after 3 a.m., the noises began again. It started with scratching, faint at first, then louder, claws dragging across wood. From the walls, the floor, the ceiling, everywhere. Claire broke, covering her ears. "Make it stop, make it stop." Then, from upstairs, came a new sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy, though uneven, as if one leg dragged behind. They crept across the upper floor, circling. Alan grabbed the poker from the fireplace, face pale but defiant. "I'll deal with it." "Alan, don't," Rachel began. But he was already climbing the stairs. The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed in again. Then Alan screamed. The sound ripped through the house, raw and short, cut off like a throat silenced mid-sentence. Everyone froze. Sarah clutched Ethan, her body trembling. And then something began descending the stairs. Not Alan. The figure was tall, draped in dripping black, its hair stringy and wet, face obscured. One hand dragged along the wall, nails screeching against wood. The air turned bitter cold, their breath misting. "Give me the child," it rasped, the voice layered. Too many voices inside one. Ethan cried out, thrashing in Sarah's arms. "Mom, she's pulling me." The figure stepped closer, its face lifting just enough for Sarah to see. The eyes were pits, black hollows that seemed to stretch forever, and within them, faces, children's faces, screaming silently, pressed against the glass of nothingness. Sarah shrieked, clutching Ethan tighter. The candles blew out. The house plunged into darkness, and in the dark, the widow's voice whispered, inches from Sarah's ear, "You can't keep what belongs to me." The morning came gray, the storm still howling. Alan was gone. His scream from the night before still rang in Sarah's skull, but there was no body, no blood, no trace he had ever stood at the top of those stairs. Mark searched every room, his voice hoarse as he shouted Alan's name. Nothing answered him, but but the wind and the occasional groan of the house. Rachel sat trembling by the fire, refusing to move. "He's not gone," she whispered. "Not really. That's how she works. She keeps them. She'll show him to us again when it hurts the most." Sarah hugged Ethan to her chest, heart pounding. She wanted to believe Rachel was wrong, but deep down, she knew the truth. The widow never gave anything back unchanged. By midday, the house felt smaller. The hallways seemed longer, bending subtly in ways Sarah couldn't explain. Windows looked out onto white nothingness, the storm swallowing every landmark. Claire paced relentlessly, muttering to herself. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands raw from scratching at her skin. "She wants him," Claire said suddenly, pointing at Ethan. "If we give her what she wants, she'll let us go." Sarah recoiled, clutching her son tighter. "Stay away from him." Mark stepped between them. "Nobody's giving up anyone. Do you understand me?" Claire sneered, but her eyes darted to the shadows, as if something else whispered to her, just out of earshot. That night, the firewood ran low. Mark and Sarah went to the cellar together, neither daring to go alone. The air below was thicker, the smell unbearable. The trapdoor pulsed faintly, as though the ground beneath it had a heartbeat. As they gathered wood from the pile, Sarah heard a sound behind her. "Mummy." She froze. The voice was high-pitched, small, Ethan's voice, but Ethan was upstairs. Slowly, she turned. At the far side of the cellar stood a child. His body was gray, thin, his eyes black hollows, his mouth stretched in a smile far too wide for his face. "Mommy," he whispered again. "It's cold. Hold me." Sarah dropped the wood, choking on a scream. Mark pulled her back, dragging her up the steps. The child's giggle echoed, bouncing off the walls, following them all the way upstairs when they returned. Ethan was awake, sitting upright on the couch. But something was wrong. His lips moved soundlessly, his eyes glassy. Rachel hovered near him, muttering prayers under her breath. Then Ethan spoke. Not his voice, hers. "You saw one of them, didn't you, Sarah? One of the little ones I keep." Sarah's knees buckled. "Get out of my son." The boy smiled faintly, tilting his head too far to the side. "He's warm. He's perfect. He will never leave me like the others did." Mark grabbed Ethan's shoulders, shaking him. "Fight her. Stay with us, Ethan." For a moment, Ethan's real voice cracked through. "Daddy, it hurts." His eyes filled with tears. "Please, make her stop." And then he collapsed, unconscious. Rachel grabbed Sarah's arm. "The longer he stays here, the more she'll claim him. We need to find a way to break the bond." "How?" Sarah sobbed. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's only one way. We have to go back down, beneath the trapdoor. That's where she's strongest and that's where she can be hurt." None of them wanted to. But as the hours passed, the house grew more unbearable. Every mirror reflected not themselves but hollow-eyed children. Every creak in the walls carried whispers. And then Alan came back. He appeared at the top of the stairs, dripping wet, his skin gray, his eyes blank. Sarah screamed, clutching Ethan, but Alan only smiled. His lips were blue, teeth blackened. "It's beautiful down there," he croaked. "She showed me everything. You should come. You'll see your true faces." Mark grabbed the fireplace poker. "Stay back." Alan tilted his head, chuckling. His voice warped, layered with hers. "You don't get to leave. Not until she has what she wants." Then his body twisted unnaturally, bones cracking as his arms stretched longer. Fingers clawed Duck. Claire shrieked and fled into the hall. Alan's corpse thing lurched after her, moving in a spasmodic, jerking gait. The group scattered, the house exploding into chaos. Sarah and Rachel dragged Ethan into the pantry, slamming the door. They pressed against it as Alan's thing stalked past, dragging its nails across the wood. Ethan stirred, his voice weak. "Mommy," she says, "if you give me to her, she'll let you live." Sarah shook her head violently, tears spilling. "Never, never, do you hear me?" But in the dark, she heard the widow's whisper, soft as silk, curling into her ear. "He will die screaming if you keep him, or he will live forever in my arms. You know which is kinder." Sarah clamped her hands over her ears, rocking, refusing to listen. But deep down, the seed of doubt had been planted. The night stretched on, endless. Screams echoed from somewhere deep in the house. Claire's voice, shrill, cut off abruptly, then silence again by dawn. Only 4 of them remained: Sarah, Ethan, Mark, and Rachel. And Rachel was right. There was no more running, no more hiding. The widow wanted Ethan. The only hope of stopping her was below, back through the trap door, into her hollow. The cellar was darker than before. When Rachel pried the trapdoor open, the air that rose out was not air at all, but something thicker, like breath. It smelled of rust and rot, heavy enough to make them gag. The shaft yawned below, its walls crawling with black roots, pulsing faintly as though alive. Sarah clutched Ethan's hand, her knuckles white. "We don't have to do this." Rachel's eyes blazed. "If we don't, he's gone. If we wait another night, she'll take him forever." Mark wrapped a rope around a beam and dropped it into the darkness. He looked at Sarah, his jaw tight. "We go together. No matter what happens." The descent seemed endless. The rope creaked. Their breaths echoed against the walls. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until their fingers numbed against the rope. At last their feet hit soft earth. The hollow stretched out around them, a vast cavern lit by no fire. No bulb, only the faint green glow of moss that clung to the walls. The air shimmered with whispers, and everywhere bones, skulls piled in corners, tiny rib cages half buried in dirt, dolls, rotted and broken, scattered like offerings. Ethan clutched Sarah's waist. His lips trembled. "They're here. The others. She keeps them close." A sound rippled through the cavern. Footsteps, not one set, but many, small, shuffling, uneven. From the shadows, children emerged, dozens of them. Their skin was pale gray, eyes hollow pits, jaws slack. Some dragged broken limbs, others clutched toys blackened with mold. They circled the group silently, staring with faces that might once have been innocent. Sarah's heart seized. She recognized one of them. A little boy in overalls, freckles still visible on his mottled skin. "Ethan," she whispered. "That's Tommy Blackwood." Rachel nodded grimly. The one she took. The boy's mouth opened. A whisper, dry and cracked, slid out. "Stay with us." Then the cavern shifted. The walls seemed to breathe, stretching outward, then closing in. The green glow dimmed, replaced by something darker, a red pulse, faint at first, then stronger, beating in time, with the widow's voice. "Welcome." The ground beneath them rippled like flesh. The children collapsed to their knees, bowing toward a deeper tunnel. From the blackness, she came. The widow was taller here, her form less human. Her hair drifted as if underwater, her face hidden by a veil of shadow. Her hands were bone-thin, claws scraping sparks against the earth. And behind her, shapes loomed, not children, but things. Twisted figures, long-limbed, faceless, their bodies stitched from fragments of bone and soil. The hollow ones. Mark raised the poker he'd carried from the farmhouse, though it looked laughably small in this place. "Stay back." The widow's laugh filled the cavern, layered with voices, some high and childish, others deep and guttural. "You come to bargain, you come to fight, but you do not understand. He is already mine." She pointed one clawed hand at Ethan. The boy screamed, collapsing to the ground. His skin crawled with black veins, spreading from his chest outward. Sarah fell to her knees, clutching him. "Stop. Take me instead." The widow tilted her head, studying her. For a terrible moment, the veil of shadow lifted. revealing eyes, like black pits with tiny hands pressed against the inside, clawing to get out. Motherhood, she hissed. Such sweet weakness. The hollow ones moved closer, their bodies jerking in unnatural spasms. Rachel pulled a vial from her coat, thick glass filled with gray dust. Salt, she said, her voice shaking. Consecrated. It's the only thing that slows them. She hurled it at the ground. The vial shattered, releasing a hiss of smoke. The creatures shrieked, recoiling as if burned. Run, Rachel screamed. They bolted deeper into the hollow, tunnels branching like veins. Behind them, the widow's laughter echoed endless. The tunnel twisted, the walls narrowing. Sarah's lungs burned with every breath. She carried Ethan in her arms, his skin clammy, the veins spreading. Then the walls opened into a chamber. At its center was something impossible, a tree. Black, leafless, its roots dug deep into the cavern floor, tangled around bones. The trunk pulsed like a heart. Rachel staggered to a stop, eyes wide. That's it. That's where she feeds. As they approached, the whispers grew deafening. Faces shifted in the bark. Children's faces, mouths open in silent screams. Mark gritted his teeth. If we burn it, we burn her. But before they could act, a figure stepped from behind the tree. Claire, her clothes torn, her face pale, but her eyes gleamed with something inhuman. You shouldn't have come, she whispered, smiling with lips too red. She showed me the truth. There's no leaving. There's only joining. Sarah's stomach twisted. Claire, what did she do to you? Claire tilted her head, her neck cracked audibly. She freed me, and now I'll free him. Her gaze locked on Ethan. The boy stirred, his voice weak but laced with hers. Mom, I think I want to go with her. Sarah screamed, shaking him. No, don't listen. But Ethan's eyes rolled back, black spreading across his pupils. The widow's voice filled the chamber, booming from every wall. You see, he is already mine. The tree pulsed. The hollow once advanced, and Sarah realized, with icy certainty, that if they failed here, the widow wouldn't just take Ethan, she would take them all. The cavern shook as the widow's laughter rattled the black tree. Dust rained from the ceiling, the roots groaning like tendons stretched too tight. Sarah clutched Ethan to her chest. His small body writhed against her, veins crawling across his skin, lips whispering words in a language she couldn't understand. Hold on, baby, she pleaded. Just hold on. But the widow's voice slid through her ears, thick as oil. He doesn't want to hold on. He wants release. I will give him joy you cannot imagine. He will never cry again, never hunger, never grow old. Rachel shoved Sarah toward the tree. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned with grim purpose. This is it. This is where she's weakest. If we do the ritual here, we can sever her claim. Mark swung the iron poker, driving back the advancing hollow ones. Each strike landed with a hiss, the creatures retreating, but never far, circling in twitching arcs. Do it then, he roared. What the hell do we need to do? Rachel's lips trembled as she pulled a small leather-bound book from her coat. Its cover was blackened, brittle, the title burned away. My grandmother gave me this, she said. She said it was how her sister escaped. Escaped what? Sarah demanded. Rachel's gaze flicked to the widow, whose form wavered in the air like smoke, her shadow face splitting into dozens of smaller mouths. Escaped her. Rachel opened the book, flipping 2 pages written in jagged, fading ink. It says we have to bind her spirit to the hollow one strapper, and the children she already owns. Sarah's breath caught. And what happens to them? Rachel swallowed hard. They'll burn. All of them. Every child she's taken, erased forever. It's the only way to cut her off. The chamber fell silent. Even the widow paused, as if savoring the weight of the choice. Sarah's stomach twisted. The children's faces swirled in the tree's bark, their hollow eyes silently begging. She saw Tommy Blackwood's freckles, frozen in gray. She saw dozens more, tiny mouths opening, silent cries muffled in the wood. Ethan stirred weakly, whispering, "Mommy, they're scared." The widow's voice purred. "He feels them. He is them. You will murder them all, just to keep one." Mark slammed the poker against the ground, his voice breaking. "What's the other option?" Rachel's lips quivered. She didn't want to answer. Sarah grabbed her arm, shaking her. "Tell me." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "The other way is a trade. A living vessel must willingly go to her. If the bond is made, she releases everyone else. But the vessel is lost forever." The widow's shadow form leaned forward, grinning, double quotes, "Yes, one for many. That is the way of bargains, and I know which one it must be." Her claws stretched toward Ethan. Sarah screamed, pressing him close. "No, not him." The hollow ones hissed, closing in. The chamber pulsed with red light. Mark grabbed Sarah's shoulders. His face was pale, eyes wet. "She's right about one thing. It has to be someone, but it doesn't have to be him." Sarah's heart seized. "Mark, no." He pressed his forehead to hers, voice low, trembling. "You save our boy. I'll end this." Before Sarah could stop him, Mark shoved her back, stepping toward the tree. The widow's shadow spread wide, enveloping him. "Take me," he shouted. "Take me instead." The hollow ones shrieked. The roots of the black tree writhed, coiling around Mark's arms and legs, pulling him closer. His body convulsed, his skin splitting in gray cracks. Sarah screamed, clawing at the roots, but Rachel held her back, tears streaming down her face. "If you break the ritual, he dies for nothing." The chamber thundered with the widow's voice, triumphant, exultant. "Yes, yes, a willing heart. I will savor him for eternity." But Rachel raised the book high, her voice cutting through the din as she began the incantation. Her words were jagged, guttural, scraping against the walls like knives. The hollow ones writhed in agony, their bodies splitting as smoke poured from their mouths. The children's faces in the tree screamed silently, their mouths gaping wider. Mark's eyes burned black. His voice mixed with hers, overlapping, echoing from the walls. "Sarah, take him and run." But Sarah didn't run. She fell to her knees, clutching Ethan as the cavern split with blinding red light. The widow howled. The hollow ones shrieked. Rachel's voice tore itself raw as she forced the final words, and Mark disappeared into the tree, swallowed whole. The roots slammed shut. Silence. Silence. The hollow ones lay crumpled, their bodies ash. The children's faces faded from the bark, one by one, until nothing remained but twisted wood. The widow's shadow flickered, smaller now, her voice weaker. "You think you've beaten me? Fools. He is mine now. He will always be mine." Then, she vanished, leaving only the echo of her laughter. Sarah held Ethan, sobbing. His skin was clear again, his eyes his own, but he looked broken, hollow, as if part of him had been left behind. Rachel collapsed beside them, the book falling from her bloodied hands. It worked, but it's not over. She's still here, just weaker, bound, waiting. Sarah looked at the tree, at the place where Mark had vanished. Her scream echoed through the hollow, raw and endless. The climb back up the rope felt like dragging themselves out of a grave. Sarah carried Ethan on her back, every muscle screaming. The trapdoor groaned open with a heavy thud, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, they stepped into the farmhouse kitchen. The silence was suffocating. No whispers, no rattling pipes, no phantom footsteps in the attic, only the stillness of a house that had watched too much. Rachel dropped into a chair, her face pale, her hands still shaking from the ritual. The black book lay on the table, its cover smoking faintly, as if burned from within. Ethan clung to Sarah, his small body trembling. "Is it gone?" Sarah smoothed his hair, forcing steadiness into her voice. Yes, baby, she can't hurt you, now. But she didn't believe it. Not really. That night, Sarah tried to rest. She lay on the dust-caked mattress upstairs. Ethan curled beside her, Rachel asleep in a chair by the window with a knife across her lap. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And then she heard it. A soft knock, 3 taps, slow and deliberate. On the bedroom wall, Sarah froze, holding her breath. The sound came again, not from outside, not from the hall, from inside the wall itself. Ethan stirred. His eyes fluttered open. Daddy. Her blood turned to ice. No, baby, go back to sleep. But Ethan sat up, staring at the wall with wide, glassy eyes. He's here. I can hear him. Sarah listened, and then she heard it too. A voice, faint but unmistakable. Sarah, her husband's voice. She staggered to her feet, pressing her palm against the peeling wallpaper. Mark. The wall pulsed beneath her touch, faintly warm, as if something living pressed back. The voice came again, muffled, desperate. Sarah, help me. Her heart nearly broke. She wanted to tear the wall apart with her bare hands, to drag him back. But Rachel jolted awake, rushing across the room. Don't answer it. Sarah spun on her wild-eyed. It's him. He's alive. We can get him back. Rachel grabbed her shoulders, shaking her hard. That's not Mark. That's her. She's using him to pull you in. The voice grew louder, pleading now. Sarah, it's me. Please. You promised we'd always be together. Ethan's small hands clutched her arm. His voice was weak, tired. Mom, it is Daddy. I know it is. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. The wall seemed to breathe beneath her palm. She wanted to believe. She needed to believe. That night, she dreamed of him. Mark stood at the foot of the bed, his clothes torn and stained with dirt. His face was pale, but his eyes shone with the same warmth she remembered. You should have let me go, he whispered. Now I'm stuck, alone. Sarah sobbed, reaching for him, but her hand passed through. His flesh rippled like smoke. Behind him, the shadows writhed. A figure loomed. The widow, her veil drawn low, her grin wide. Mark's mouth moved, but the words were hers. One sacrifice is never enough. Sarah jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The knocking on the walls had not stopped. By morning, the house had changed. The wallpaper bulged in places, seemed splitting open. From inside the walls came faint whispers, like breath moving through veins. Ethan wandered into the hallway, tilting his head. Daddy says we should stay. He says it's safer here. Rachel's face drained of color. She pulled Sarah aside, her voice sharp, urgent. She's not gone. She's bound to the house now, and Mark, whatever's left of him, she's wearing it like a mask. Sarah shook her head violently. No, I heard him. He knew things only he could know. Rachel grabbed her wrist, eyes blazing. That's how she works. She is him now. That night, Sarah tried not to listen. She held Ethan close, humming lullabies until her throat cracked. But the knocking grew louder, and the voice, Mark's voice, turned angry. You're keeping me from him. From my boy, you selfish bitch. You'd rather let me suffer than let me hold my son. Sarah sobbed into her hands. She couldn't take it. Ethan climbed out of bed, padding toward the wall. He pressed his tiny hand against the wallpaper. It's okay, Daddy. I'm here. The wall split. A thin gray hand pushed through, its fingers writhing. Reaching Dot, Sarah screamed. Rachel tackled Ethan back, just as the hand snapped shut. Inches from his face, the wall sealed, leaving only a smear of black against the peeling paper. The widow's voice filled the house, layered with marks, with dozens of others. You will never leave me. Sarah collapsed to the floor, clutching Ethan, her sobs breaking into raw gasps. Rachel knelt beside her, knife still clutched in her hand, her expression grim. She's in the walls now, in the house. We can't fight her here. If we stay, we're done. Sarah's tear-streaked face lifted. Then, where do we go? Rachel looked toward the window, toward the black woods stretching forever. There's only one place she can't follow, but to get there, her voice cracked. We'll have to go back through the hollow. Sarah's scream echoed into the empty farmhouse. The house could no longer hold them. By dawn, the walls pulsed with whispers, seams splitting wider. Voices bled through the wood in a chorus of mockery and grief. Marks. The children's, strangers Sarah had never heard but now knew too well. Rachel shoved a chair beneath the doorknob, clutching her knife as the wallpaper bubbled and blistered. Around them? We have to go now, she hissed. Before she seals us in. Sarah strapped Ethan to her back, her body trembling. He didn't resist. He just whispered softly, as though talking to someone only he could hear. It's okay, Daddy. I'll come back. Sarah's stomach nodded, but she forced her voice. Steady. We'll get him back, sweetheart. Just stay quiet. The three of them fled into the woods. The hollow waited. The rope still hung down into its throat, frayed and damp. The air that wafted upward smelled like rust and rotting fruit. Sarah froze at the edge, her chest heaving. We can't go back down there. Mark is in there. Rachel grabbed her arm. That's the point. He's bound to her now, and she's bound to this place. If we cut the root, we sever her grip. Sarah shook her head violently. And if we fail, what if this is what she wants? Rachel's jaw tightened. Then at least we'll die knowing we tried. But if we stay up here, she'll bleed into everything. The town? The world? You saw what she did to him. Sarah stared into the pit, her body shaking. Ethan stirred on her back, whispering, It's not so bad down there. Daddy says it's like coming home. Rachel flinched, her grip tightening on the knife. He's not talking to Mark. He's talking to her. The descent was longer this time. The hollow felt deeper, the walls shifting as though alive. Roots bulged, twitching like veins. Shadows crawled across the stone, not matching their movements. Halfway down, Ethan began to hum a lullaby. One Sarah remembered singing to him as a baby, but the voice that carried it wasn't his. It was Mark's. Her hands nearly slipped from the rope. Stop it, please. Ethan giggled softly, his head lolling. Daddy says it's almost time. The cavern floor was slick with black water. The tree loomed taller than before, its bark cracked wide, oozing red light from its core. The faces were gone. The children's mouths no longer gaped from its trunk. But the tree wasn't empty. It breathed. Each pulse rattled the chamber, shaking loose chunks of stone. Rachel knelt, flipping open the charred book. Her voice wavered. It says the widow's root isn't the tree itself. It's below it. We have to go under, through the water. Sarah's throat closed. Into that the black pool rippled, as if something massive stirred beneath. Rachel's hands trembled as she traced the lines of ink. If we don't, she wins. Ethan slid off Sarah's back, his bare feet splashing into the pool. Wait. Sarah lunged, but he only smiled at her, his small hands raised as though greeting someone. She's waiting for us, Daddy says. If we go with her, no one has to hurt anymore. Sarah's scream echoed. Don't listen to him, please, baby. But Ethan's eyes weren't his own. They gleamed with a faint red glow. He turned toward the tree, his voice layered with whispers. She promised me forever. The widow unfolded from the bark. Her veil trailed into the water, her fingers long and trembling like broken branches. She towered above them, her face shifting between dozens of forms, children, mothers, Mark, strangers, all overlapping like fractured glass. Her voice filled the cavern, sweet as poison. You came back. How lovely. And you brought me what I asked for. Sarah pulled Ethan behind her, shaking her head violently. No, you can't have him. The widow tilted her head. But he's already mine. He offered himself before you were even born. A child for a child. A promise made by your mother, Sarah. Sarah froze. My mother. The widow's grin widened, teeth like shards of bone. Yes, you never wondered why you were spared when others were not. She gave me your son to keep you safe. That is the bargain. That has always been the bargain. Sarah's knees buckled. Her mother, dead for years, had left her son to this. Rachel's voice cracked as she shouted the incantation from the book, her words burning the air. But the widow only laughed, the sound shaking the cavern. Speak all you want, little girl. You cannot cut what was promised in blood. The water surged, and Ethan was dragged under. Sarah screamed, diving after him. The pool swallowed her whole. Darkness closed in, thicker than tar. Shapes writhed around her, hands brushing her skin, mouths whispering in her ears. She thrashed, lungs burning, clawing through the void until she found him, Ethan, limp in the black. She pulled him to her chest, kicking upward. But the surface seemed impossibly far. Then she saw it. A root, massive and glowing red, pulsing like a heart deep in the abyss. The widow's true body, it throbbed with every beat of her laughter, and, wrapped around it, fused into the bark, was Mark. His eyes opened, hollow and endless. Sarah, he whispered, don't fight it. Just let us in. Her scream tore bubbles into the void as the root's tendrils wrapped around her legs, pulling her down. The black water dragged Sarah deeper. Her lungs screamed for air, her arms tightening around Ethan's small, limp body. The root pulsed in the darkness like a vast, beating heart. Tendrils coiled around her ankles, her waist, her throat, and there, bound to the root, fused into it like a crucifixion, was Mark. His eyes were open, his mouth moved, voice muffled by the water, yet somehow echoing in her skull. Sarah, don't fight. You'll only make it worse. We can all be together again. You, me, Ethan, forever. Her tears dissolved into the dark. She wanted nothing more than to let go, to stop fighting, to drift into the warmth of his voice. But Rachel's muffled scream carried faintly from above, piercing the haze. Sarah blinked, clarity shoving its way back through her grief. This wasn't Mark. Not anymore. The widow unfurled from the root itself, her veil streaming in the water like oil. Her voice vibrated through every inch of Sarah's body. You already belong to me. Your mother promised me your line, and now your son carries my mark. Ethan stirred in Sarah's arms, his eyes glowing faintly red, a faint smile on his lips. Mom, Daddy says it's okay. We don't have to be scared anymore. Sarah's heart cracked in two. No, baby, that's not your daddy. That's her. Ethan's smile faltered, confusion rippling across his small face. The widow leaned closer, her mouth stretching impossibly wide, voice thick with sweetness. Tell him the truth, Sarah. Tell him you want this. Tell him you'll let go, that you'll finally stop running. Sarah's chest convulsed, her vision blurred. The weight of the water crushed her ribs. She closed her eyes, pressed her forehead against Ethan's, and whispered, I will never give you to her. Never. The widow shrieked, the sound ripping through the abyss like shattered glass. The root tightened its hold, tearing at Sarah's flesh, dragging her closer. Mark's voice roared through the water. You selfish bitch. You'd let me rot here while you run free? You'd leave me again. Sarah's scream tore from her throat, bubbles spilling from her mouth. You are not my husband. Her hand found the knife strapped to her belt, Rachel's knife, silver gleaming faintly, even in the dark. With the last of her strength, she drove it into the pulsing root. The cavern convulsed. Light burst from the wound, burning through the water like fire. The root writhed, splitting open, black ichor boiling into the pool. The widow's scream shook the hollow to its foundations. Her form dissolved, veil unraveling into shreds of smoke. The tendrils holding Sarah and Ethan snapped, disintegrating into ash. Mark's body, bound to the root, reached for her. His face softened, for just an instant. His voice was not the widow's, not twisted, not cruel, just Mark, thank you. And then he was gone. His body crumbled into dust, scattering into the light. Sarah kicked upward, dragging Ethan with her, her body screaming for air, her vision darkened, her chest on fire. She broke the surface with a ragged gasp, choking, dragging Ethan into her arms. Rachel leaned from the rocks above, her face streaked with tears. Sarah, hold on. She hauled them out as the cavern shook, the trees splitting apart, red light pouring from its core. The hollow collapsed around them. They ran. The farmhouse was already half swallowed by the earth when they emerged. The walls caved inward, windows shattering, the roof sinking into the chasm that had opened beneath it. The whispers were gone. The knocking, the faces, the voices, gone. Just silence. Rachel clutched Sarah's arm, her voice shaking. It's over, you did it. Sarah held Ethan tight against her chest, rocking him as he sobbed. She wanted to believe Rachel. She wanted to believe it was truly over. That night, they sheltered in Rachel's car, miles from the ruins of the hollow. Ethan lay in Sarah's lap, asleep at last. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, but Sarah couldn't close her eyes, because as the moonlight streamed through the window, she saw it, a faint, jagged line across Ethan's wrist, like something had wrapped around him, like a root. Sarah's tears spilled silently, dripping into her son's hair. She pressed a trembling kiss to his forehead, whispering into the dark, "Please, God, don't take him too." Ethan stirred in his sleep. His lips moved, soft and small. "Mommy?" Sarah brushed his hair back, her voice breaking. "Yes, baby." His eyes flickered open, and for a heartbeat, they glowed faint red. "Daddy says good night." The world froze around her. Sarah's scream tore through the car, echoing into the endless night.